Welcome back, Pokemon trainers. It is the second match of our Friday broadcast of the Victory Road World Cup of VGC, sponsored by Agado, Medifi, and GG Tour. So, the first match was so exciting. We got to see a lot of Regieleki action. We got to see some Trick Room dominance. I wonder what our second match is going to have in store for us, Evan.
Yeah, I'm also very interested to see how players innovate on their teams. As we saw in the previous matchup, the teams were not that standard. There were a few tweaks, and I like how people do this in these kind of team tournaments, team competitions, where you bring sort of an extra Pokemon because you do your homework. So you bring an extra move, something interesting. Like we saw that Max Quake out of Mud Shot from a Calyrex Shadow. We also saw a psychic move coming out from it. So I think both players really did their homework, but unfortunately, the Trick Room was just able to go wild and be able to help win the set for Vietnam.
Yeah, exactly. A really great set to kick us off with today's broadcast. But we have got a second match for you. It is going to be between Puerto Rico and France. And I'm looking forward to seeing how our players are going to come down against each other. You can see it here. It's going to be between Matthieu, Barbe, and Kenneth, Tirado.
Yep. So these teams are in Group 6. And for France, they actually lost 2-6 to Australia last week. And at the same time, Puerto Rico also lost to China, 2-6 as well. So this is an important match for both teams to get into the competition, to be able to get at least 3 points with that win over there. So I think both countries really do need to fight as hard as possible. Both countries are not strangers to the group stage. They have been here before. They have qualified here before. So both really need to fight very hard to win this for their teams.
Yeah, they definitely want to reestablish their reputations a little bit. And if we take a closer look at how Puerto Rico and France are currently stacking up against each other, it is 1-1. So already very close. We've got a few interesting Pokemon in there. I can see a Reshiram, which I absolutely love to see. In fact, that is a team that I know was used in the junior division by one of our European players from Germany, and it is a really interesting team to pilot. Having the Mimikyu on there just is allowing you to get the Trick Room up, and we all know I love to see the blue Gastrodon, Evan.
Yeah, it's really interesting. As you guys have seen, during the break, this Calyrex Ice and Reshiram team will be the team of choice for Puerto Rico. So it's also interesting to see that the teammates working together and then practicing with the same team and bringing them in. From France side, speaking of the same team, this is a team that we all know France players to use very well. So both Hippolyte and Florian did manage to top cut, I think, Lille regionals with that team. There were 3 of the same team during that period. That was such a crazy experience to see, and can see some results here. So it does seem like players are going for comfort in this matchup because this is a very important one.
Yeah, the Shedinja really is symbolic to Team France at this stage. It really, we've seen so many French players use it and use it to great success as well. It's not just a gimmick, it's actually being piloted expertly as well in order to get those top cut places. But if we take a deeper dive at our players here for the second match, we have got Matthieu Barbe, who has been a world competitor before in the junior division back in 2012. So it's interesting to see, 10 years later, how they're now establishing themselves in those higher divisions. For Kenneth's side, again, World Cup competitor in 2021. So both these players really trying to establish themselves in the more modern era of Pokemon VGC.
Yeah, so from my homework here, these players are kind of at a negative record, so this is really their chance. They are being featured on stream, really their chance to get a win for their country and do well in Series 12 in general. The past teams that Matthieu brought were what we call Pengy Rain, since Pengy is joining us in the broadcast later. And from Kenneth, he's been trying out Calyrex Ice and Palkia a few times. And was able to win a game off of it. So coming back again with this Calyrex Ice and Reshiram instead for this matchup, I think that's an interesting way to keep practicing this Trick Room archetype. Notably, this team had sort of rose to popularity in the Liverpool regionals by a player from Italy called Alex Della Pasqua. We know him as Gilgamesh. And from then on, everybody picked this up. They thought, wow, what an interesting team built by a player all by himself with Calyrex Ice and Reshiram, and we do see it in action here. And from France side, this is a very interesting core of Zacian and Dialga.
Yeah, I really love seeing the team that Kenneth is bringing. It's one that actually I've been playing a lot on the ladder myself, and
Whoa.
I just absolutely have done so well with it. You know, for little old me sitting behind the commentary desk, I've been really proud of how I've been doing on ladder with it. And like I said, I know some of the junior players over here in Germany have been experimenting with it as well. You know, in the run up to NAIC, for example, and it certainly gave them a lot of experience in how to kind of use a team such as this. You know, being able to pilot Trick Room, being able to use a more elusive restricted like Reshiram as well, and like you said, Alex de la Pasca really kind of stormed through, I believe it was at EUIC, with that team, and just yeah, it was just so captivating. I remember commentating on it and just being like, I love this team, I want to try it, let's wrap up these matches and let me get a rental code. And I'm looking forward to seeing how Kenneth is going to pilot it, particularly against such a strong team like Matthieu's here, where you have got, you know, the Dialga, again, a Pokemon that can be so frustrating to deal with if particularly you are the Calyrex. And again, Grimmsnarl is a Pokemon I always worry to face because you never know what form moves it's going to be running, and they can be so disruptive. So game one is going to be key information opportunity time for Kenneth.
Yeah, and not forgetting like all the Trick Room setters we see on the screen here. The Porygon 2 from the previous game was so like bulky and just really able to help win the game, as we do see the leads come up here.
Yeah, it's going to be the Incineroar and the Mimikyu coming out for Kenneth. Going to be trying to go for that fake out Trick Room potentially, or maybe even throw a cheeky burn around the battlefield, as Matthieu has gone for the Dialga and the Grimmsnarl. So again, potential Trick Room here and potential disruption.
Yeah, interesting to see the ability from Dialga not come out. So we kind of can guess that it's telepathy and not pressure, maybe because there's a Landorus beside it to be able to Earthquake. And we see that Intimidate come out first. And as most like Dialga players do, they kind of Dynamax turn 1. I think it does make sense to just put off like a lot of offensive pressure and be able to use like Max Quicks or Max Steel Spikes to give the team boost, you know, together with Grimmsnarl that can potentially set up screens. So let's see what goes on here.
Yeah, well, it's going to be a taunt coming out from the Grimmsnarl straight into the Mimikyu, so going to be trying to present Trick Room, and we don't see a Mental Herb activation there as well, so it will remain taunted as the Max Wormwood comes out, picks up a solid KO against that opposing Incineroar. So much damage coming out from this Dialga.
What's with today and Incineroar going down first turn? So yeah, okay, and again, the Dialga holding the Life Orb again, so going for Max Dragon, Max Wormwind instead of a Max Quick, potentially calling the like Sugar Berry on the Incinin, like really wanting to take that Incineroar out, at the same time taunting the Mimikyu to not allow Trick Room to be set up. I think it's a very powerful turn coming out from Matthieu here.
Yeah, absolutely commanding first turn from Matthieu. And I have to say, Dialga, like I said, this is one of these Pokemon I hate coming up against, because you've already mentioned you have the potential to get the screens, and then the special defense or normal defense boosts up with Steel Spike or Max Quake, and it just means that Dialga is then so difficult to get rid of. You know, thanks to all the defensive strategies in play, it's so hard to deal significant damage against it. But then Dialga has just perfectly demonstrated how offensive it can be as well, going and getting a solid KO against that opposing Incineroar, removing such a disruptive and annoying Pokemon to face, you know, throwing down those Intimidate that could be really annoying for the Zacian or the Rillaboom, for example, and removing that fake out pressure. Absolutely brilliant play. Kenneth now is going to be Dynamaxing up the Reshiram, so putting one of his restricteds in play in order to start dealing out some big damage. You have to find a way to deal with this Dialga. Yeah,
and the beauty of Dialga is in its typing, in that it is not like it doesn't take Dragon moves super effective, it doesn't take Fire moves super effective. So I think the Dynamax from Reshiram here is just like kind of defensive. A move came out from Grimmsnarl, I'm not sure, it might have been a fake Tears. You usually see that on the Grimmsnarl beside your Dialga, and Reshiram didn't drop in speed. Reshiram was able to actually move first to go for Max Quick to boost special defense back up. So the Reshiram is at -1. And look at that, Max Wormwind, wow, it's really just able to take the KO with that Life Orb.
Yeah, we saw the special defense drop on the animation. We're learning our different languages here today, Evan. But amazing, you know, synergy between both of Matthieu's Pokemon here. Like you mentioned, going for those fake tears, drop special defense, help Dialga out a little bit more. Going into a Dynamax Pokemon, you sometimes do need that extra edge in order to pick up the KO. And Dialga is just picking up KOs left, right, and center. And now you have the Calyrex coming in. It's not in Trick Room. It's going to be a prime target for something like a Max Steel Spike.
Yeah, so going for something like the the fake Tears followed by the Max Steel Spike should be more or less like correct thing for Matthieu to do, as we I think do see the forfeit coming out from Kenneth here, possibly trying to preserve some information. We would not know what that item on the Calyrex eyes is. We do see Calyrex eyes sometimes run Babiri Berry like just now, and maybe even the focus sash. So that could be useful information to keep. And I think Kenneth is making that decision to do so, since the Dialga still had one more turn of max and was just like really, like you said, taking KOs left, right, and center, and really being very commanding on the field.
Yeah, and I really agree with that decision to preserve the information. You know, all the Dialga needed to do was go for a max Steel Spike, go down into that opposing Calyrex, possibly reveal the item as well. And then there's Mimikyu against 4 remaining Pokemon, and there's really not a lot that Mimikyu can do in order to get those KOs. It certainly does play more of a supportive role. So just a commanding beginning there from Matthieu. And now with your Kenneth, how are you going to adjust? Because that Dialga there didn't seem to be away with the Pokemon in terms of the leads and the strategy that Kenneth was going for in that game, to stop the Dialga in its tracks, really. There was just not enough offensive pressure coming out from Pokemon like the Reshiram, for example, in order to pick up KOs against it.
Yeah, and at the same time, I feel like you have good information on some of the sets, like the Life Up Dialga, and more importantly, the Grimmsnarl, right? The Grimmsnarl has Taunt. Then the Mimikyu didn't have the Mental Herb, so could have been like something different. And maybe Incineroar could have just went for the Fake Out on the Grimmsnarl on turn 1 to be able to set up Trick Room safely. But this is actually an adjustment coming out from Kenneth here.
Yeah, we often see something like the safety goggles on those Mimikyus. So interesting that, you know, the taunt was able to connect down into it, and that was good information for Matthieu to have. It is going to be an adjustment, however, from Kenneth. The Reshiram is going to come out straight away, paired up with the Amoonguss. Certainly a pesky Pokemon that Dialga doesn't have as easy a time of getting rid of. And if you potentially can put that Dialga to sleep, that could really make things a lot easier for Kenneth in order to start picking up KOs. But this Grimmsnarl is still going to be disruptive. It can always go for a taunt, stop the spores from coming out in the first place, and thus stop the redirection in the following turns as well. So really, this Grimmsnarl is very, very disruptive to the supportive strategies of Kenneth's team.
Yeah, I felt like maybe going for Rage Powder and Trick Room could have been a better strategy, but instead, Kenneth is bringing like the faster, more offensive Reshiram here on the field, and choosing to Dynamax it on turn 1, potentially like wanting to do as much damage as possible with the protection of the Amoonguss.
Yeah, I love seeing this Dynamax Reshiram as well. Going to be trying its best to get this game out for Kenneth here, but it's going to be matched up with the Dynamax on Matthieu's side, and looking at that Master Ball, looks like it is going to be, of course, that Dialga once again. Going to be trying to start racking up the boosts, trying potentially just to deal with this Reshiram as early as possible, and Grimmsnarl certainly has the capability to be able to support it, going for something like a Fake Tears. But for this turn in particular, you still have to worry about that Amoonguss going for that redirection, and that's what we see here. Amoonguss using that Rage Powder to draw in the attacks of both of Matthieu's Pokemon here, allowing Reshiram the opportunity to attack. It is going to be the taunt coming out, so there's going to be no more Rage Powders coming out from that Amoonguss on the following turn, leaving Reshiram a bit more vulnerable, but it's able to go for the Max Flare into this Grimmsnarl. Now, Grimmsnarl is so annoying for Kenneth to deal with, but it's not enough to pick up the KO, Evan.
Yeah, wow, just showing how bulky and how good of a supportive Pokemon Grimmsnarl is. And here comes the Dialga going for a Max Quick that actually did so impressive damage into the Amoonguss and threatening a 2-hit KO at the same time, allowing both the Grimmsnarl and the Dialga to get a special defense boost. Like, I feel like you don't really need the light screen here, right? Especially with Dialga being able to use those max moves really wisely. This taunt coming into the Amoonguss is really just going to put a wrench in Kenneth's plan, and Matthieu can just easily go for the Fake Tears plus Max Dragon or Max Move combination.
Exactly, and I think, you know, the Dialga dealing so much damage thanks to that Life Orb is putting Amoonguss in a difficult position as well. It's certainly very vulnerable in this next turn, and like you mentioned, getting up the special defense boost frees up the Grimmsnarl to not have to go for something like a light screen. I think we got a little bit of a sneak peek at the moves, and it definitely looks like this Grimmsnarl is a little bit different to the ones we see that maybe have things like Reflect and have light screen and are that support. Dialga can, like you mentioned, kind of do that itself, going for these great max moves to get the boosts. It's going to be a hard switch for Kenneth, however, and it's going to be that Gastrodon coming in for the Reshiram. So we don't normally see Pokemon, you know, switch out of their Dynamax, but it's going to be a double switch for Kenneth. Amoonguss leaving the field as well, going to use this Regenerator ability to get a little bit of HP back and also break that taunt as Calyrex joins the field.
Yeah, I feel like this makes sense for Kenneth here, as we do see the fake tears followed by the Max Dragon combination. But I like the idea of switching the Among Us out, since Among Us is the only Pokemon that can redirect moves from Kenneth's team, hopefully to allow the Among Us to come back into the Gastrodon slot over here and be able to go for Rage Powder and finally Trick Room to set Trick Room up after the Dialga ends its Dynamax to try for Kenneth to try his best to make full use of that Trick Room environment.
Yeah, always sad to see the little Gastrodon have to sacrifice itself for its teammates, but it does give Kenneth the opportunity that he hasn't gone for here. I was going to say is give him the opportunity to do what you said you wanted to see, Evan, and have Trick Room and Rage Powder next to each other. But instead it's going to be the Reshiram coming back in, and it's no longer in its Dynamax. It's not going to have utility to access its max moves, but it is still going to be relatively speedy out here on the field. The issue is Dialga is getting up those special defense boosts. The Reshiram isn't going to be able to hit it as hard, and Calyrex is much slower outside of Trick Room. It's going to be really difficult here, I think, for Kenneth to be able to deal with Dialga.
Yeah, and I feel like that Max Steel Spike into the Calyrex slot is very obvious, right? Yeah, as we actually see another taunt coming in from the Grims now. I think that's a good idea, going for just that last prankster move like Hail Mary before you get KO'd by the Reshiram over here. So yeah, Grims now Dialga is really just able to do go for another max move and take yet another KO. I think today we've been seeing in these two matches that we've been casting together, players identifying the correct max target, Dynamaxing on turn 1 and doing the going for max moves that are very difficult switch-ins too for the opponent. So I think just well managed by Matthieu in general.
Yeah, I completely agree. Both of the games so far have been very hyper-offensive, and again, I love the play here with the Max Whirlwind. Not only paired up with the Fake Tears, you get the KO on the Reshiram, but you also lower the attack of the opposing Calyrex, so it's a little bit less of a threat as your Dynamax as the Dialga ends. So you are in a much stronger position. Yes, the Amoonguss is back on the field. It has got a little bit of HP back, but you've now brought your Reshiram to play. Your Zacian to play here, and Zacian can deal so much damage to any Pokemon here. It's going to be interesting though. Amoonguss, like it said, it's got a little bit more HP back. Possibly it can go for the Rage Powder, allow Calyrex to try and deal some damage. But Glacial Lance isn't going to do too much to Zacian, and Zacian's the Pokemon I think that's going to cause Kenneth a few headaches going forward.
Yeah, and more importantly, the taunt has been set onto the Calyrex eyes, so it just is very difficult to set up another Trick Room, and Kenneth just puts in the towel here, unfortunately, and really the game just went so fast and so explosive, and I think Matthieu just identified the correct max target from turn 1 and really just able to execute his plan really well.
Yeah, Matthieu is able to take the set 2-0 and get a win for France on the roster. So I believe that now puts them at 2-1 against Puerto Rico as the matches currently stand. So it's still very early on. There's still a lot of matches to play for, and that score can certainly change, but it's certainly a strong start for France.
Yep, so we still have the weekend way ahead of us for these players to really fight their hearts out to win, help their countries, help their teams win as many matches as possible. So all the best to France and to Puerto Rico for the rest of the matches going forward. Yeah, I'm just thinking of how Kenneth can get through the match there, maybe to go for Rage Powder and Trick Room, but unfortunately we really just didn't see it play out. And I'm quite impressed by the power of Dialga, and with that Zacian in the back being able to switch in, that was such a cool thing to see.
Yeah, the power of the steel types, definitely having such offensive pressure on the field. And I think, yeah, you're right. Possibly the Rage Powder Trick Room would have been a slightly different game, but unfortunately it wasn't to be for Kenneth in this particular set. We're going to take a really short break, and we'll be back as we're at the halfway stage with our third match very, very soon. So don't go anywhere, trainers.